My name is Chad Schimmel. I own and operate Turner's Warehouse here in Gilbert, Arizona. Do mostly wood turnings, a lot of pen making, a lot of ring making, a lot of handle stuff, and we do tons of resin casting, both for blanks we sell and to help people make things out of resin, river tables, turning blocks, whatever the case may be. If you are not familiar with us, you can check us out at turnerswarehouse.com. Now today, what we are going to be doing, if I can remember the right cameras here. All right, we're going to make some rings. And I think with an hour and a half, we can probably get 2 of these done. So we'll try a couple different things. And what we're doing is we're making what I call a comfort core or a flat top ring. And basically it's just that, it's a flat top. And it has a nice smooth comfort inside, so it's really comfortable to wear. It's not a square edge or a sharp edge, and it makes for a really nice ring. Now the cool thing about these rings is you can make them from just about anything. We're gonna do some wood today, but there's also a lot of other choices. There's resins. You can see this one here is a resin with pine cones. This is a resin with a bill cast into it. This is a fan favorite, Fordite. That's layers of paint. And then that's Fordite that's been beveled a little, and I'm not sure if the camera will pick that up. But it's really neat because you can do a lot of different things. And as you can see, this doesn't take a lot of material. So if you have cutoffs from other turnings, you know, maybe you made a really cool handle or duck call or who knows what, and you had this little chunk that you cut off, it's kind of a wasted piece, but for a ring, you've got a whole new thing here, and it'll actually look really spectacular. I think maybe we'll make this purpley blue one, unless you all want to vote on different colors. But these are all stabilized woods. They're maple, there's box elder, that looks like a maple burl, really cool colors. But these are all just cutoffs from stabilized blocks that we turn something else out of, and they make excellent ring blanks. The only thing you have to be sure is that your block is big enough for your ring. So whatever ring you're gonna make, if you have enough room like that, you've got way more than you would even need. You can see how much wider it is and how much bigger around it is. So it's kind of a cool thing that you can reuse something that you would have normally just tossed and make something totally new out of it. That kind of goes for resin cast. This was a cutoff of a handle of a color we call purple abalone. It's a really cool purple shell. And you can see that it's probably enough to make 2 rings if I was careful, which I won't be. But you can see it's really perfect sizing. And then of course we do cast blanks just for rings. This was actually cast this weekend at our live demo that we had here at the store. Zach Higgins and Elise from Starry Night and Resin Works made up some concoctions. So I actually kind of want to turn this just to see what it looks like inside. Because other than what I can see, the blue and the glitter, I have no idea what they put in this. So maybe we'll do that one if we have time as well. And then of course, this is called Fordite. This is layers of paint. If you've ever seen any of the pens made out of Fordite, I've been making Fordite pens for years because they just look so cool and they're very popular among people who like to buy pens. So Fordite is a great choice. And this was a total scrap. It actually was half of what you see, and it was twice as wide, and it was a cutoff from a pen blank, and I cut it in half and glued it and sanded it. And what my plan would be is to put the ring right in that area, and I should get all kinds of really crazy swirls and things. So there again, I'm going to take a piece of cut off Fordite. Now of course you could make other jewelry out of this, and that's fine, but in my eyes it was kind of trash or scrap. And I'll probably make a ring that's quite valuable. A ring like this could easily sell for 150, 200 bucks. Just because the Fordite is so hard to find, and this kind of a pattern is super unique. So it really opens up our options. Yeah, I mean, Emily says she loves the Fordite. Most people do. The Fordite is really cool. And the real cool thing is if you can get those swirls and things to line up with your pattern when you go to put it in there. So having it sideways like this will have some challenges for turning and cutting and drilling, but if you can pull it off, the end result is pretty nice. All right. So I want to talk a quick minute about ring cores. And the reason being is there's a lot of options. I'm going to grab a drink here. When you go to make a ring, there's other types of rings, but this is the comfort core. So we're not going to talk about inlay rings or any of that today. But these comfort cores, they come in a variety of different things. And what I mean by things, I should say materials. There's steel. There's ceramic, and they come in 2 colors of ceramic. Black, actually they come in multiple colors because we have, at our store we have at least 4 because we have pink, white, black, blue, and there may be something I'm forgetting. There's titanium, there's steel, there's tungsten, and you can get them all in those different things. And what's cool about that, here's a ceramic. And it probably doesn't show up as well on the camera, but this is like, feels like it's paper thin, but it's incredibly strong. And here, this is a pine cone cast blank on a steel, nope, said that wrong, ceramic pink core. I guess the pink should give it away that it's not steel. But this ring, I don't know what it weighs, but it feels like it weighs nothing, and it's incredibly strong, it's incredibly durable, and it's really cool looking. So you can really get creative with your colors, not only with what you're putting on the ring, but what you're choosing for your core. Because you can kind of match it up or sync it up. Now if you're just starting and you want to make a couple of these, I would suggest stainless steel. 1, because it kind of goes with most things. And 2, it's really affordable. We sell these stainless steel core rings for $3. So you figure if you have a good quality core for $3 and a cutoff, you can make a ring for under $5. That's pretty valuable and pretty beautiful. So it's a really cool thing, and it just takes a little practice. So check out the different cores. You can kind of decide what you want. And the other thing with cores is they all come in multiple widths. So the ring can be either a wide or a narrow. We actually have 3 different widths: 4 millimeter, 6 millimeter, and 8 millimeter, and then all the different sizes. So each row of rings is from top to bottom, floor to ceiling, because of all the different sizes and half sizes. And you have a lot of options there. So the hardest part about rings when you're making them for other people is getting sizes down. You pretty much want to make samples and then let them get sized, and you can make them for them specifically. All right, so we've kind of talked about blanks. The blank is kind of an open option that you can really do anything with. The ring cores, you have a lot of options on materials, sizes, and widths. And now let's talk about a few tools. So the first thing I'll talk about is the ring mandrels. Now, ring mandrels are super handy and very useful. If you're going to make one ring, don't buy a ring mandrel. It's kind of a waste if you're only going to use it once. Now, if you want to make multiple rings or you think you might get into it, it's definitely worth getting ring mandrels because they make the process a lot easier. Ring mandrels are a tapered mandrel, and usually there's a size range. Like this one is 4 to 8.5. This one is 9 to 13 or 14. And how they work is it's an expanding system. So there's a screw in the back that you can loosen and tighten, and in some cases just take out if you don't need it. And your ring slides over the mandrel to the first step that it fits on. Now, a lot of times when I'm using steel, I'll take the screw out of a mandrel and push it on, and if it's snug and it doesn't move, sometimes I don't even put the screw in. It never hurts to have it in and to snug it up because you won't hurt anything, but sometimes it's just not needed. So you definitely don't want to over tighten it and bend anything. And with ceramic, you don't want to over tighten and crack. because ceramic is very, very strong, but actually expanding it from the inside out is the easiest way to break it. So that's something to keep in mind. Now when you're doing this, if you weren't going to use a mandrel, you could turn, a tapered rod that you could use kind of as a jam chuck for the ring, especially for how much turning and sanding. You'll see we don't do a whole lot with these because they're so small, but there is a little bit. But if you're just going to make one, that's the way I would go. If you have any other questions on that, we can always address that later, or you can contact me. But if you're doing one, that's the way to go. But otherwise, these are a great investment. They cost about 30 to 40 bucks, or we have different kits with them. So it's a worthwhile investment, especially if you can sell your first ring for over $100 that you don't have a lot invested in. You can kind of cover your materials pretty quickly without having to lay out a lot. So it's kind of a cool thing as far as that goes. Now, the other things we're going to be using for this are pretty basic tools. I'm going to be using easy wood carbide tools. Typically I'll use a diamond and a square with a negative rake when I turn rings. We will use a drill chuck or a Jacob's chuck, and we will use a boring head. Now, boring head is another tool that if you're going to do one, I wouldn't get one. If you're going to do a lot of these, I would definitely get one because this makes the process a lot easier. And I think today I'll show setting the ring by hand versus setting it with the boring head, and just to give you an idea of how the difference is. Now, you can do it both ways, and a lot of the process here, I'm going to show you two different ways, or at least explain the other way in case you don't have the same tooling. But there's always more than one way to do things, and this is no exception. So let's get started and just see how it goes. All right. So in the comments, anything, anybody want to see wood first, resin first? Don't care. Let me know and we will pick one. All right. All right, looks like we got a few people coming in. If you're just joining, if you have any questions, throw them in the chat. All right, what I'm going to do is mark these. I'm going to mark the center. So I'm just using a center finder. And it's kind of it's for drilling and for lining it up. But it's not super, super important. Now this one, I'm not going to use a center finder because obviously I've got a really weird shape here. And keep in mind, if we do this one, you might get a sample of how these can come apart, because these folds, this is the Fordite, these folds are actually just where the paint layers went in for some reason. So there could be dirt in there, there could be an inclusion, it could have been the way it was dripping, who knows. But if I was going to mark this, I would take my ring, and I would want to use a big ring for this because I would want to show off all this stuff as much as possible. It would be kind of silly to take this cool piece and then turn a little ring that doesn't show anything, but I would kind of eyeball it and say, okay, I want to show the outer part there, so that would kind of be my center. And that's for the purposes of lining it up and doing all that. All right, we got a bunch. Wood first, resin, wood, resin, Fordite, wood, Fordite. I think wood one. So we'll start with the wood, and then maybe we'll do that Fordite second. Or the resin, we'll see. Okay. So we're going to do that. First thing I want to do is get my blank onto my lathe. So what I'm using here, I've just got a 4-jaw chuck. This happens to be an SC4, and I've got this little block in here. And this is, again, waste from something else. I think it was a cutoff, I don't remember, but I'll use this multiple times for rings. And it's just a way to hold my ring to the lathe. So I'll put this block in, lock it down. And one thing you want to make sure is that this is square. I should say as square as you can get it reasonably, because you're going to be mounting this block to it. So if this is got a crooked angle to it, then it's going to move your whole ring blank around. So it looks pretty flat. I flattened it before, but let's see. So what you can kind of do is just run in on it a little bit here. And if there was anything sticking up or any of that, I would clean that up. But I can tell that my blank is reasonably square. If you're ever not sure, give your blank a sand, just to make sure that it's square. I'm actually going to grab some sandpaper. So I actually thought this blank was more square, and it appears to have a little high spot on the corners. So I'm just going to, just going to square it off a little bit. And I shouldn't say square because that's not what I'm doing. I'm just kind of flattening the edges a little. Oh yeah, I can see where the high spot was. So it might have set after I cut it or sanded it and moved a little bit, because these were cut a couple weeks ago. Yeah, Rick said this is where a pole might have helped. I agree, Rick, but unfortunately I don't know how to do that. But who knows, if we have time, we'll do all of them, so we'll see. All right, so that looks pretty good. I got those high spots down. And now when I line this up, or put this on here, it actually looks like it's flat. Whether it actually is or not, probably doesn't matter too much. Okay, so if you remember, I drew the center point there. And what I'm going to do is bring my tailstock in, and I'm going to use that center point to put this on here. Now, this block can go on this waste block a number of ways. A lot of people will double-side tape it, glue it, whatever works. I prefer to glue because, I don't know, seems like it's a little stronger and it's pretty easy to get off, so why not? Double-side tape would work. I would just fear that when I was drilling or something, I would, move it. And then it's kind of wasted, because if you're too far into the process and it moves, you're not going to be able to line it up much. So I'm just going to use some thick CA. And I'm not going to use a lot, keep in mind. It's going to be fairly minimal. What I'm going to do is spray my waste block with accelerator first. I'm going to put basically some in each corner and some in the center. Now, if I did it all just in the center or just in the corners, I would have an issue, because one, I'm going to drill out the center, and two, I'm going to turn off the corners. So if I just did one, it might not be good, but if I do a couple spots, then I should be okay. All right. So first thing I like to do, obviously I would give it a little more time if I had time. Give it some accelerator here. First thing I'm going to do is turn off these corners, and it's not that I can't do it later, but if I do it later, it's going to be more difficult or more precarious when the ring core is drilled out and I have less holding it on. So the sun came out and the skylight lit up, so it made it brighter in here. So I'm going to turn these off, because I like to do that first, because then I don't have to worry about pulling the blank off later. Now we're going to hope that this is dry enough. All right. So I'm just going to come in and turn these corners down. And I'm using the negative rake. I don't have to use a negative rake. I could use any other tool. But because I use my waste block over and over, I don't necessarily want to destroy it with a gouge or something. And I'm just going to round. So I don't want to go super far because one, I don't know how my ring size is. Obviously I've still got tons of room, but I don't want to go too far to where I'm encroaching on the size of my ring. I still want a lot of meat on the outside of the ring. So I'm almost around here. I'm going to finish that up and then we will proceed to the next step. And the reason I have my diamond tool is so I can get into this corner easily. And square that up along with the rest of it. Okay, so now I've got a round blank. My glue should be cured. I'm going to back this off. And now we have to essentially make the hole, turn the hole for the ring to go in. Now if I hold this ring up, you can see I've got a pretty big blank. Get you a different angle. I've got a lot of meat left on this ring, so I don't have to worry about that. I'm more than probably a width and a half wide, so I've got plenty of width there. So I don't have a lot to worry about there either. So what I want to do first, actually first I'm going to take this off. I knew it wouldn't last. That's my one day this year I wore long sleeves. All right, any questions so far? I know we're just starting, but while we're switching over here. So first thing I want to do is take out my live center and put in a drill chuck, Jacob's chuck. All right. Seats. Now, I want to drill this hole. You can drill it with any kind of drill bit, and you can drill it any size. If you start small, you're just going to cut and cut and cut and cut and cut. So start with a bigger bit. I like Forstner bits. You don't have to use them. This was the one I had here. I might even try to go a little bit bigger if I had my whole set here. So you can see it's a little small. It actually fits inside the ring, but it could have been a little bigger. Now, a word of warning, don't try to drill a hole that's exactly this size. One, you'll never find the exact right one. And two, if your bit has any kind of movement and it's really close, you're going to bore your hole too big and your ring's going to be sloppy. And what we're going for is not a loose fit and not a tight fit. We're kind of right in the middle. We need just enough of a fit that we can put some glue around it and still slide it in snugly, but not squeeze all the glue out. And then at the same time, we don't want our ring floating around in there moving because then it won't be in the right position. So the hole is kind of a tricky thing, but not really. It just takes a couple practice times to get it down. So we're going to put this bit in. And this is a size bit this is. This is a 3/4. Probably could have gone 7/8 with no issue. but this is the one I used on the last ring, so it was ready to go. Okay, get that up close. Lock it down. And we want to spin this. So my lathe is on the highest belt. So around 1,000 is as slow as I can go. If I could, I'd probably lower this to 700-800 maybe, but we're going to go for it. Once I get the initial cut going, it's pretty easy. Now, if you've ever cut or drilled stabilized wood, a lot of dust is normal. You're essentially drilling a wood that's half resin, half wood. So it's a little unique. But I don't want to overheat this either, so you can see I'm backing it up a little bit. This stuff likes to heat up really fast. So there's probably a little smoke there and a little bit of dust. But I don't want to smoke it and burn it. And that's probably a little bit to my lathe going too fast. So I'm being a little extra careful. So you can see the hole, we're getting in there kind of nicely. We're nowhere near our ring size, so that's good. Now, one thing to keep in mind is how deep we're drilling. So what I'm doing, you can't see it when I had the camera close, but every time I drill, I'm looking to see, one, if I can see that brown, because part of the reason I like that for my backing is it's a complete opposite of the color. And I'll see the shavings start to come. So as soon as I touch the brown, I want to stop. I don't want to drill in there any further than just meeting the edge. Definitely a little smoke coming out of there. And if I'm not sure, I can kind of peek in and see where I'm at. I got just a tiny bit more. Looks like I'm right on the edge. And you could actually hear it when I broke through there, just like when you're drilling with a Forstner bit. You could actually hear it kind of pop that last little bit of this loose before it hit that wood. So I barely touched the wood, which is perfect. Now, pop that out. We'll use that again when we do the other ring. Oh, I think I might have closed the... Nope, we're still on. Okay. Now's the fun part. So when I do rings, and I do them fairly often, I use the boring head, which I'll show on the resin ring here in a minute. But I want to show just doing it by hand, because if you're doing this, like I said, once or for the first time and you don't want to buy that tool, that's no problem. You can use a carbide tool, or any tool for that matter. But you need two things. One, you need it to fit in the hole. So if I had drilled a little tiny hole and my carbide tool wouldn't fit in it, that would make it a lot more difficult to size to the ring. Now, this has got quite a bit of size to go here. So by taking an eyeball here, I can kind of see that I need to take off quite a bit. Now, two things to remember. One, you need to make your hole as you go in there as straight as you can, otherwise it's not going to be straight on your ring. And two, you're taking off one side, but it's spinning, so if you think you're taking off a millimeter, you're actually taking off a millimeter off each side. So you got to really kind of sneak up on the size, and that can be the hardest part. Generally, when I do the demos live and I show cutting it by hand, I demonstrate how to not do it, because I usually make the hole too big, but we'll see what we can do here. So I'm just gonna take off a little tiny bit. And what I like to do, I'm just cutting an edge right there, and then I'm going to try to push my tool straight in. Now what I just ran into is my tool, because the hole's relatively small, and I have my tool center, I'm hitting the bottom of my tool before I go into the ring. So what I got to do is kind of cock my tool a little bit, get my tool straight, and then I can go in. I'm just going to go till I hit the back. And whether I went straight or not, I couldn't tell you. It seemed like I did, but half the time when I glue them in, I'm like, well, that was definitely not the straight cut that I thought it was. So again, I'm going to just kind of take a tiny, tiny cut, and then I'm going to push my tool straight in. And it's going to try to push out on you, so you really got to push into it to keep the cut going straight. And if you had a little skew or a little tiny scraper of some sort, it might be a lot easier with that. I'm just cleaning up the back where I know I came out a little bit. So what I did with my cut was I went in and I could feel it kind of go up like that, so I was just kind of trying to straighten it out. And you can feel it with your finger if it's close. And then you just keep sizing it. So this is the tedious part of these, especially when you're doing it by hand. And then you can see, like, I hit, and it's a thud. I actually get a couple shavings off that, so I know. See how close I am here. I still got a little ways. So I'm going to make a bigger cut. Flat all the way back. Feels like it. There's a lot of back and forth here. Okay, I'm getting really close. So now I want to be careful not to overdo it, not to take too much out of there. Just going to ease in on it. And always stop this before you try to size it. You can stick your finger in here while it's turning, but you are kind of asking for potentially a twisted finger. So I'm really, really close. So I'm just going to be easing off of here. Oh yeah, we're right there. All right. John, you asked why that size? What are we talking about? Are we talking about the drill bit? Okay, so the good news is I can fit in and it stops. So my hole goes like this. It goes kind of a curve in. So my ring kind of starts in and then stops, which is actually the best way to have it if you're not going to have it straight, because at least I know that my hole is good on the outside. So I don't need to cut anywhere on the outside. I just want to come in here and clean up the inside to match the outside. And then your ring hopefully will slide in, just like that. So let me pull this out. So you can see that I can't really pull the ring out easily. I kind of have to go side to side. And that's because there's not a lot of movement in there. So when I slide it in the hole, I can't do this, which is actually good. So when I slide this in, see if this is better. You can see it kind of goes in there pretty nicely. Now that's the perfect hole, actually. So I want to keep that just like that. Now I want to make sure there's no dust in there before I glue this. And actually you can see on the ring here that there's dust on it. So I'm going to do a couple things. I'm just going to wipe the dust off. I'm going to try to get this out. I don't have an air hose with me today. But there's the purple dust. All right. Now, before I glue this in, there's a couple things I want to do. First, I want to take and mark this core. Actually, no. Looking at this, I can tell it's not quite straight. So I'm going to clean this up real quick. And what I'm going to do is on this outside, I'm just going to clean up the edge because the ring core was flat on the back side, or the ring blank, but not on the front side. So I'm going to trim this off. And I certainly could have done this first. Probably would have been a great idea. Just want to make sure it's clean and flat. That looks good. I'm going to double check my fit. Alright. Alright. Double check my fit. Looks great. Actually, that's probably the best one I've ever done on demo. Usually I have them quite sloppy because I'm talking and not paying attention. Alright, so that looks pretty good. Next thing I want to do is mark the outside of this ring. So I'm going to be cutting this blank off of this waste block, and I want to have just a tiny bit of extra, but not a lot. So that will give me, if I cut that line, that will give me just enough to work with this ring. Now, I do the gluing a little different than a lot of people. A lot of people will take this off, cut it and glue it, which is fine. Whatever works for you, do it. I like to glue them in the core, and I don't know why. I've always done it that way. So I'm going to glue it in the core. First, I'm going to take this sandpaper. This is some 120, I think. And I'm just going to rough up my ring. And I don't know that this does a lot, but couldn't hurt. It's kind of like the debate of, do you scuff pen tubes when you glue them in? Does anyone scuff their pen tubes? I don't. All right. Get all the way around it, rough it up. Make sure you wipe it clean. And obviously I've got a lot of dust here, so I've got to be careful not to overdo it. Yeah, 2 picks to get the cores out. That's a nice tight fit if that's what you have to do. That's good. All right, so I'm going to put glue in here, glue my ring in, and I just want to glue it to the outside of this edge. A lot of times in the old days I would push it all the way in and then turn up to it, but I kind of found that counterproductive when I'm trying to cut the back, because then I'd be trying to cut past the ring. So this way I have a line where I want to cut behind, and I should be fine. You can cut this with a parting tool or a saw, whatever you have handy. And I'm using BSI thick glue. BSI is my favorite glue. So I'm going to spread it all around in here. Then I'm going to smush it around, make sure I got the whole inside covered. Because any extra glue will just turn off or push in. Alright, then fairly quickly, get this core in here and just turn it to the edge. I'm right to the edge here. So that looks good. I'll give this a spray. And really what I'm spraying is not necessarily the outside, but the inside, because I pushed some glue in there and it's on the inside of the core. That will help cure it and be ready to go. So, my ring core is in. It actually looks like a nice fit, so I'll show you here. You can see my edge is even. I can feel the ring and the blank are even all the way around. If they weren't, if they were a little crooked or it was in a little too far, that's no big deal. You would have just turned it down right to the ring core. I can show you what that would look like. You would essentially just line this up and turn it right to your ring. I'm on the back there, but I touched as soon as I got there. Especially with a stainless core ring, you're not going to hurt it. Especially carbide, you're going to just make it shinier, so you don't have to worry about that. But let's cut this loose here. Question is, why don't I use epoxy? Good question. I don't use epoxy because two things on rings. Generally, I'm trying to get it done fairly quickly. I'm usually not making rings several at a time. Usually it's one at a time. So for me to make a ring and use epoxy, I just have to wait longer. I mean, it probably is better if you have the time, if I had to say. But I will say this, I've never had a ring come loose with CA glue. So it's worked pretty well for me. But epoxy is definitely a great choice if you have the time, why not? All right, let's cut this sucker loose. So I'm going to go in with my diamond here, make my hole. I really need a diamond parting tool. I hate this little guy. See if she's sharp. What we could do actually. We'll just turn this down here. So epoxy, good story. Never bad to use epoxy for anything. A little bit closer. Pop it right off. So you can see my glue just right there. When I actually got close, the glue line just popped right loose, which is actually pretty perfect. So I don't have to worry about that a bit. All right. Now what I'm going to do, and maybe this is why people do it, like gluing it in after, but I prefer not to. So I'm switching chucks here. And this is a little SC2 mini chuck. And I just like to pop this in. And I could see why people would not prefer this, because you kind of don't have perfect control of the center, but I like to come in and kind of clean this up to the edge. So I've got a lot of material. This is still my waste block, or not my waste block, but my stabilized block from when I turned it. When you get to that stainless, you'll actually hear the sound if you touch it. Generally, like I said, you can't really hurt it, but you'll hear a little sound. Now I've got kind of a concave shape, so I'm going to go ahead and turn off this outer edge because it's going inward. But this is what I wanted to show. This is the glue. So remember I said that the glue would be on the inside? So the glue kind of pops off anything that gets on the inside of the core. Because the core is so smooth, it'll come off. So I've got that pretty clean without doing a whole lot there. So I'm going to square this outer edge up. And actually we're going to round this a little bit anyway when we go to shape it. So even if we didn't do that right then, it's no big deal. But now we've got this ring inside of a piece of wood. So if you were happy with this size, this wasn't my size, you know, I guess you're done. But most of us are not done at this point. So we're going to turn this down just a little more. And we're going to use the ring mandrel for that. So I'm going to use a collet chuck because I have one. If you don't have a collet chuck, that's no big deal. Use your Jacobs chuck that you drilled with in your headstock and put your ring mandrel in. Ring mandrel just slides in, lock her down. Straighten that out a little bit. And then we want to put this guy on. Now, it doesn't really matter what side you put on. I tend to put the best, cleanest side inside because it's easier to work on the outside than it is on the inside. So if I need to get up close to it and kind of trim up some excess, I'm going to use the outside because of the taper of the chuck. I'm sorry, the mandrel. It's a mandrel. All right. Let's see if we got any questions. Can you make it out of unstabilized wood? Yes, you can. However, you risk, damage or breaking. You might want to, let me know if that's a better view, guys. You might want to use an unstabilized wood that's already fairly strong. Like, if you used a rosewood or something, it's strong. If you use Buckeye Burl unstabilized, you're probably going to have bad luck. Let me know if that's a better view. We'll keep that one closer so you can see it. All right, so what I've done is put the ring on the mandrel. And now that you're seeing the close-up, we can do it again. So this is my better side here. It looks cleaner, fresher. So I'm putting that in. I'm holding it up against the shoulder and tightening this down and expanding that mandrel. Now, one important thing to keep in mind with these mandrels, and I've used a bunch of different brands. We have some, we get some from different manufacturers. None of them are perfectly centered or perfectly in alignment. And I believe the reason is because you've got three pieces of metal that you're expanding outward. And every time you expand and contract them, they go in a different way. So to have them perfect, I don't know how you can do it without using a dedicated expanding mandrel for a certain size, which are out there, but they're a little pricey. So you kind of have to bear with these that, let's see, they have a little bit of outer round to them. I mean, this is not terrible, but you can probably see it just when I rotate it, that there's a little bit of wonkiness. It generally won't affect the ring too much, and if it does, you can kind of compensate for that. A lot of times I will turn a ring, loosen it, rotate it a little bit, tighten it up. That way, if there is a concentracy problem, I don't know if that's the right word, I kind of adjust for it. So you kind of got to figure out what works for you. Okay, now the fun part. So we get to bring this down, and we get to turn this one. So we're going to turn it, get you on this camera. And I'm going to use my Easy Wood tool. Let me make sure I tighten that with all the talking I was doing. I'm going to use my negative rake, and I could use a regular tool, would be fine. But, you know, this is kind of a fragile little tiny turning, and it's kind of a weird piece the way it's just sticking out. So I'm going to ease into it. And I have a lot of material to take off here actually. When you look at this, if you look at the ring, you know, the ring core is inside there. Maybe I'll come this side. And then look how thick that is. That's like at least 1/4 of an inch of material. I got a lot of turning to take off. So as cool as that thing is, it's going to all be gone. So you could certainly use a little gouge of some sort. You could use a skew. Heck, you could use your round carbide. You could use a diamond. Whatever your preference is. So there I've cut about half of the material away. What I'm trying to do is really keep this straight. So I don't know if I'm the only one, but my brain works when I look at the mandrel and it's slanted, my cuts tend to follow the mandrel. So I really have to make sure I'm focusing and keeping the cut straight so that I don't end up with a weird shape. And actually I could have upped my speed a little here. That'll help. Alright. Now when you get down to size, it's all going to be preference. So how thick you leave it, if you're making it for someone, you might want to ask them, you know, what they like as far as the size. The shape, obviously I don't think you want something jagged or sharp, so you want to round it, so that's kind of important. But shaping is really kind of your choice, and that's the artistic side of it, where it comes in. So you can decide that as you go or beforehand if it's for someone. See, now I just moved that ring on the mandrel, and it definitely felt like it was out of shape. So that tells me that every time I move it, it's going to have a little bit of different shape. So what I'm doing is kind of rounding to the corners. Now I don't want to come all the way and make a thin piece of wood. I want it to be kind of blunt, but I will take my little diamond tool and kind of chamfer to just gently. And if I have material that I'm worried about for any reason, I can take some sandpaper and kind of chamfer the edges. Or if I need to clean up, glue or excess material that was on the edge of it, I can use sandpaper. So the shaping is kind of a fun part where you get to see how the wood looks, how it's coming out. So I'm actually going to take that down just a hair more. You know what happens when you say that. All right, while I'm doing this, let me ask you guys a question. Does it look like the runout is on the collet chuck and not the mandrel? No, I've actually checked the collet chuck. It's perfect. It's a Beal chuck, which is actually a nice chuck, and they generally don't have a problem. It's pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and shape this just a tiny bit with sandpaper. Do you guys want to see a friction finish on this or a CA finish? We could do either. But we will jump after this ring to a resin or a Fordite. So let me know what you guys want to see. I'm relatively prepared for both. And I probably would recommend, if you're making wood rings, well, I don't know, CA is good, but also can crack if it's mistreated, so it's kind of a tough thing. I've had good luck with both, but you want to use what you're comfortable with. Alright. So I've just got some 600 sandpaper here. Oh, let me see if I can get you guys a better view. Try to go under so you can see what I'm doing here. Now this is a burl, so I don't really have grain to worry about, but I want to make sure it looks good. You don't want to spend all this time and then shortcut the finish or the sanding. That's actually a pretty good looking little burl ring. The edges are nice and smooth. And I'll post pictures. Tomorrow I'll post pictures on the Turner's Warehouse Instagram and Facebook of these rings. So if you want to go check them out, you can see the close-ups of these. Because it's hard with the cameras to get real good close-ups. But let's see here. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Turner's TV on YouTube, because we have a bunch of videos of these and other turning things like this. Let's see if I can get it. So there it is, unfinished. And you can see all that material. I mean, it's turned down to, if I had to guess, a millimeter or so. It's pretty thin. All right, let me look here and see what you guys want to see. We got a couple CAs. CA resin. Maybe you mean UV resin, Mike. I'm not going to do that on this one. Fordite, okay. Looks like we're going to do a CA. All right. What Beal Collet would work for a core size? So, if I understand the question right, what collet would work for the holding the ring mandrel? If that's your question, it's a 1/2 inch. So you could use a drill chuck, just like we drilled with. You just got to make sure that the capacity is a 1/2 inch. Sometimes they're 3/8. If it's a 1/2 inch, you could use that in your headstock and hold your ring mandrel just fine. All right, so I'm just going to take my flat paper, make sure my edges are all flat. That paper's no good. And I should be pretty close if I'm not, but sometimes there's little feathers of glue that hang on. And it's weird because they can almost elude the sanding because they're so soft, they just mat up against whatever they're with. It happens a lot when we do the inlay rings. So I'm just making sure my edges are clean and flush. Looks pretty good. All right, any other questions? Or I think we're gonna do a CA, if everyone's up for it. Now, my CA finish, I generally use Flex CA, but I didn't bring any over to this shop. So I'm gonna use regular CA, which works just fine. The Flex is nice. We have Flex in both BSI and Mercury at our shop. And the Flex is nice because it gives the outside a little more give. So instead of, if it gets whacked, instead of being brittle, it'll be more of a giving, so to speak, surface, which is kind of nice. All right, some stuff out of the way here. Now, I would probably recommend, cleaning your station and blowing it off good before you do a finish of any sort. But for demonstration purposes, we always hear, for demonstration purposes, we're going to roll with it. All right, so CA finish. I truly believe people make CA finishes a lot harder than they need to be, especially with pens. We do demos here at our shop where someone will come in and say, I can't get the CA finish right. I put 1,300 coats on it and I've been working on it for 2 hours. And I say, you got 5 minutes, we can go sand it off and redo it. And they kind of look at me like, yeah, right. And they always are amazed. So don't make it harder than it needs to be, but let's do a quick CA finish. So I'm gonna take a paper towel. See, now that I'm zoomed in, it's harder for me to zoom back just a hair. Okay, there we go. So I got a paper towel, I'm taking thick CA. Now I do like to start with a thinner coat, but I didn't bring any thin. So we're gonna start with thick. I've wiped that clean. I would have probably put something on it to clean it better, but we're cool. Slow this down as slow as it'll go. I'm gonna put 1 drop on here. Especially for a ring, don't overdo it, because all that glue is just gonna end up everywhere else. Now, one thing you gotta do with a ring is make sure you get the edges. And that's a good way to squeeze all your glue off. So, put that first drop on there. You can even stop it. I put the first drop on and let it kind of squeeze around. Get the edges. Don't worry if it's a little on the rough side, because we're gonna take care of that. So then I'm gonna give it a quick spray. Turn it back on. Coat 2. Quick spray. If you want to see a pen, doing this on a pen, I have a video of it. It takes about 5 minutes, and that's how long it should take you once you get a little practice under your belt. Again, I'm just doing a drop right into the ring. Make sure you get the edges. Now, stabilized wood is a big help for this. So if you're going to do a wood ring, stabilized is probably a good choice because the wood is essentially got resin in it, which will make it stronger and longer lasting. I think this is our 4th coat. So when I'm putting this on, I'm going all the way across, but I'm not pushing so hard that I'm squishing the glue from side to side. I want the glue to sit on top and soak in if it's thin enough. But that's 4 coats, that's enough. So now that I'm done, I'm going to give it a little more accelerator. I'm going to bring in some water and put something down on your lathe, protect it. I want to stop this and touch it, make sure it's dry, and it's rock hard. So one thing I can't really show well is this should look like an orange peel. Whoops, wrong way. It should have the kind of the roughness of an orange peel to it. And what that to me means is that I've kind of got an even coat. I don't have lines going around it, so that's good. It's just kind of a hazy finish, which is nice. Now when I turn this on to sand, I'm going to sand with 800 sandpaper. This is 800 wet dry. And I'm going to sand it so carefully. All I'm trying to do is make it smooth and flat. So I'm going to touch the edges, make sure I don't have any buildup. And then I'm going to go across the middle just gently. And I want to make sure that water's puddling in the middle. And I kind of use my thumb to judge the smoothness. But you're not sanding you don't want to sand the finish off, or the CA off. You just want to smooth it up. So if you're sanding very long, you're sanding the finish off. So that actually feels really smooth. See if it looks better for you guys. I don't know, can you tell on camera that it's smoother? Probably not. But actually, when I look at it, I see a couple little shiny spots. So that means I didn't sand quite enough, but I'm really close. So I'm just going to go back and forth. I sand everything wet. It's just my preference. You can do whatever works for you. But I'm not putting much pressure on there. I'm just trying to smooth out that CA. And again, I'm going to dry it. Okay, now when I look at it and rotate it, it looks flat and I don't see shiny spots. So I'm actually good to go as far as that. And normally I would actually use Zona Paper. Zona Paper is similar to micro mesh. It's 6 sheets. But today I'm going to actually use Yorkshire grit to polish this. The Zona Paper to me is probably the best way. I've used micro mesh for years and it works fine. But Zona Paper is 6 pieces versus 9 in micro mesh, so it saves me 3 steps. And I feel like the shine is just as good or better in most cases. I rarely use a finish on plastics or CA. I rarely use a polish of any sort after I'm done sanding with Zona Paper, so it's the ideal choice for me. Okay. So because this is a CA finish, I'm going to use the Yorkshire Microfine. And I'm just going to barely use any because this ring is tiny. And the white is a little harder for me because I can't see it on my paper towel like I can the wood stuff. Let's get in here. But I'm just going to, oh yeah, can I just see it shining more? I don't know if you guys can see it on the camera, but it kind of went from kind of hazy to shiny. I'm just going to give a tiny bit more on here, and I'm going to do the edges. I'm just pushing into the edge, really. And you can see this, the black is where I've hit my, like if I hit my mandrel, that steel gets really black. So what I don't want to do is be on my ring and then rub that black into it. So I generally move to a fresh spot that has the finish on it, so I don't get that black crap on the ring. So now it's done, I'm just actually going to clean it with dry. I'm just going to push on that. And I think you will see that this is actually quite impressive. I don't know if I can get it in the right. You see it has a good shine. So I've been really pleased with the Yorkshire grit for the finish. I use it a lot on wood with sanding sealer and friction finish, but on this CA, it polishes up just fine. And to me, if you can get away with this and it looks good, that's a lot faster than going through 6 steps of Zona or 9 steps of micro mesh. And as long as you're achieving the same thing, why not? Now, I will say normally I do spend a lot of time on the finish because it seems silly to do all that other work and then rush through the finish and have it not look good. But that just is an example of how good it can look fairly easily. So, any questions on the wood before we move to the resin? All right, I'm gonna jump into some questions here. Have you ever tried turning a mandrel like a jam chuck? Absolutely. If you're only gonna do this once or twice, just taper a piece of wood for the size of the ring and use it as a jam chuck. It works great. If you wanted a friction finish, what kind would you recommend? I use Mylands. So my standard finish on wood, which would include rings, pens, anything small, bowls even, is I sand up to 240, 320. I use sanding sealer, Mylan sanding sealer. I use the Yorkshire grit right after. I get it all off of there. And then I use Mylan's friction finish. And I kind of have come through some stuff the last year and like made my finish better and better, and kind of less is more on a lot of this stuff. I was always using too much, and I found that especially on pens, I do a lot of pens and smaller stuff. A pen, I use 1 drop of Mylan's friction finish. So I got it in this little bottle so it's easy to pour. Shake it up, put 1 drop on your towel and do your pen body, and that's perfect. I used to just coat it with it and it would be all gooey and sticky and it didn't look good. So less is more. I did put a video out on YouTube a couple weeks ago about that. If you want to watch it, it's really good. But that is the wood ring. Now, we have 45 minutes. If you guys want, I can do resin or Fordite. So let's do either this blue resin cast by Zach at Resin Works and Elise at Starry Night. They did a little collaboration. And I kind of am curious about it, but I don't care. We can do the Fordite or this one. You guys let me know and I'll get stuff ready for it. And I'll explain the process again. So if you came in late or you just came in, we will freshen everything up and kind of run through it for you. And then you're going to see a really cool ring at the end, so it's going to be worth it. So I'm just cleaning up my face here, getting off that glue from before. Making sure I'm flat-ish. This is wood turning, just has to be flat-ish. All right. Okay, we got a resin, Fordite. Can you refinish the ring when it gets dull? Absolutely. No problem whatsoever. You don't actually have to refinish it as much as you'd think. I've done a couple, and somebody brought a ring in the other day that they had for 2 years, and I expected it to be really bad. And it was dull, but it wasn't bad at all, and it took me 5 minutes to refinish it, so it's kind of nice. All right, I think Fordite won. Would you guys say that's correct? Looks like a lot of Fordite. I'll tell you what, we'll do the resin. I'll do the resin this week as well and post pictures, because that's going to look cool, but I think Fordite wins. Okay, so we're going to go a little faster here. I need my live center. And really this is just for, here's the other thing. I didn't really plan to turn this, kind of I guess. I would have cut this round, because this is going to be kind of a bear to cut. We'll see how it goes. Actually, I got an idea. But it's not going to love being cut because this is layers of paint. So Fordite's layers of paint. And what's weird is I'll be turning Fordite and a layer will come off and there'll be a piece of paper in there. And I'm like, how did a piece of paper get in that paint? One time I was turning and I could feel something hit me in the hand. And I looked and it was like a sheet of metal, little tiny thin, like almost like foil but thicker. And that was in there. So the paint just comes apart. So you never know what's in between the layers. But that's kind of the beauty, and that's kind of the cool part of when you get these layers, because you don't know what caused the folds, and it looks really cool. So this will be a good ring. All right, yep, 10 Fordite, 6 resin, we're doing it. All right, so I'm gonna show you what my plan is here. because I didn't prep this, this has actually been an example piece for a long time, so it's kind of cool we get to turn it. But these corners, one thing you never want on Fordite is corners, because if you, well, this one's pretty solid. A lot of times if you chip at it, the layers will just go and peel off. But I got an idea. Get my glue, get up here. Let me see which ring we're gonna do. I'm gonna do a white ceramic ring. So I've got my center point. I don't know if I wanna zoom in here. I got my center point. I'm gonna use that on my live center here to glue it. But what I'm gonna do, this could get weird. That's what you pay for. I'm gonna put some glue on this. Actually, I'm gonna put a lot of glue on this because normally I wouldn't put near as much, but I don't want this to come off because it's kind of a weird material. All right, centered-ish. That's close enough. All right, push that up against there. And for the sake of whatever, I'm gonna try to actually use this for flatness. I'm gonna give it just a push there for a minute. Hopefully that'll hold on there. A sanding block would be a quick way, absolutely. Have a sanding block around. Normally I have my disc sander that I can just stick into my chuck, but for some reason I didn't bring it. Okay, so I'm going to use the ceramic. What I'm going to do to kind of make my life easier, I'm going to kind of go around this. Now this is much bigger than I need, but I'm going to just kind of do that. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring in, normally I always like to round blanks with the tailstock up, but I actually think if I go inward here and push in on it versus on the edge, I think we'll be better off. So let's try it. Let you guys have a look. So this stuff does not love being turned, but actually you can already see on these edges where the tool went in how cool this is going to look. So I'm just going to keep cutting this to get this big block piece off here. See if you can see it. This big block piece. That's what I'm afraid will rip the whole thing off, so I'm going to just keep cutting on it back and forth. So that actually worked pretty good, and I think, maybe I shouldn't have glued it so hard. These chunks are actually pretty valuable, so you don't want to toss these. Jewelers love them. But you can see now my blank is actually round and should be fairly manageable. So I can bring my tailstock up to be my friend here. And I can now clean up this a little easier. So that is beautiful stuff. And there you go, you get a kind of a view of the edge, maybe there. Looks really cool. So that's what we're going for on the ring. We want a lot of those curls and these little guys, little teardrops of water looking at a paint. Okay, back to it. So now we need to drill this sucker out. I'm going to want to do it very carefully because paint is very inconsistent, but it should work fine. Now I'm going to slow this down. So let me get this locked up, and I'm going to not tighten this all the way, but just kind of snug it to where it doesn't wobble as much, because I really don't want this to walk in the paint. Now this one won't get near as hot as the stabilized wood. However, heat is not your friend here either, because the paint layers will come apart in the heat. If you ever overheat Fordite, it'll come apart. I feel like I was hearing the paint cut through a little. A little bit slow. And it sounds like it just cut through right there. Let's see if I can see it. Yeah, it's actually, that's the wood. All right, so we are in. So we've cut a hole in. Now we're going to use the boring head. So if you guys were waiting for the boring head, this is the boring head portion of the day. What is a boring head, maybe? Okay. A boring head is actually a tool that comes from the metal turning world, I believe. Funny enough, I always used these on my metal lathe before this, but then when I realized all the things I could use this for, I use it quite a bit. And a boring head is simply that. It bores a hole. So you can use a variety of different cutters. This happens to be a pretty cheap carbide cutter, works perfect for anything I do with ring making. There's two positions here and the side. There's lockdowns here for locking your tool in place. And then you have this little dial on the side, and that is your micro adjustment. So what we're going to do is put this into here, get up close, and we're going to lock everything down, and then I'm going to adjust this. Oh, I have to turn it. And by going left and right, forward and backward with the Allen wrench, it moves the boring head one way or the other. Just slight movements, fractions of a millimeter even. So you can really sneak up on your ring size. So what I like to do, I'm going to put this inside this hole, and I'm going to get right up to it by tightening, and now my boring head cutter just touched the inside of the ring. I'm going to back it up. I'm going to advance it one full rotation because I got quite a ways to go. Actually, we'll do two to start here. Because remember, each movement is very micro. Now that's still, the rule still applies when you're getting close, you want to sneak up on it, and I'm talking like quarter of a turn or less, eighth of a turn, because you don't want to overcut it. But what I'm going to do, let's see if, I'm going to hold this down so you can see it. I'm holding the boring head because I don't want it to twist. If it catches, it could twist and the cutter's kind of in a precarious spot. So I'm going to hold the head here. Get that out of the way for you. Oh, one other thing I forgot to mention. All these shavings from the Fordite, these make excellent inlay for other things because they're like little rainbow shavings. Really cool stuff. Okay, so I got everything locked-ish. And I'm going to just go in here. This guy. And you'll be able to see it. We'll start to cut. And I'm taking a relatively large cut here. Actually, we're going to back that off. That's too much. I was overzealous with this guy. Where are you? So I'm going to back it up one rotation. And the cool thing about the boring head is it cuts the hole straight in. So you can see that lip going straight into the hole. I don't have to worry about my tool going, you know, in or out at the end. If it cuts straight in, it's straight in. And then bring it out. So now my hole is perfectly bored straight in. Bored in? I don't know. And I still have quite a bit of distance to go. So I'm going to just repeat this several times. I won't have to move this every time. It's hard to see when it's on the other side. So I'm going to go one rotation. On. Locked, locked. You can see that cut right there. That's how much material I'm removing. And you saw the wood chips at the end when I touched the back. Kind of gives you an idea. Oh, I'm closer. Okay, now I'm not going to make near as big a move. I'm actually going to go, let's go, I'm going to go quarter. Let's see what that does. Still removes quite a bit of material, that quarter of a turn. Went all the way in there. I think I grabbed a different ring core. Oh, actually that one looks pretty good. So that slid in there. That was, so you could see I went from 2 rotations to 1 to a quarter, and it still got there very quickly. And the ring is perfectly straight in there. So the beauty of the boring head is the consistency. So like I said, if you're going to do it often, get one. If not, don't worry about it. Okay, so let's clean this out. Now, you do want to scrape your ceramic cores. However, sandpaper, I'm going to do it, but I don't think it's going to do much. Usually, I use like a hone or dressing tool for a grinder wheel, because I think they have diamonds in them, and that really scrapes it up. Maybe I could use my diamond grinder here on the CBN wheel. It doesn't do a whole lot. So this isn't ideal that I didn't have that, but I wasn't actually planning on doing ceramic. I just think this is going to look really cool in this Fordite, so we're going for it. But you do want to scratch this up with something that has diamond in it to get it. You could even use like maybe like a diamond stone or something. But it works well. Okay, we're going to do the same process as before. I'm going to mark my ring on the outside, which I don't have a lot of extra. Probably about the same as before. About the width of my parting tool. Uh-oh, I already see a couple little divots in the Fordite. Hopefully that stays together. Looking at this from the side, you can see where these junctions are in the paint. So that's where I have to worry that it could come across or come apart. And actually, I don't know if you can see there, but let's see. Down in there, there's a hole in the paint right there. So when I put this CA in for the ring, I'm going to actually squirt that full of CA. and hope it doesn't come apart on me. This ring is going to look amazing if it works, because the challenge will be getting it to turn without blowing it up, because there's a lot of gaps and a lot of seams in this particular piece, and that's the stuff that likes to come apart on you. So generally, it won't be the core or the glue or any of that that fails on Fordite. It's the Fordite itself. Look at that. Doesn't that look cool? So I'm just going to let that hopefully get down in those little cracks a little bit. And then I'm going to hit it with my CA. Get some inside there. Now, if you've never turned ceramic ring cores, they're very durable. They're very strong. The worst thing you can do is expand them out and crack them, like I mentioned before. Turning them, just like the steel, if you touch the ceramic with your carbide tool, it might scrape a little ceramic, but very little, if any. Ceramic is intensely hard. They make a lot of things out of ceramic I never knew. All right, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to clean it up a little bit here as best I can. So you'll see me a lot with Fordite, whether it be pens or rings or anything else. You'll see me a lot of times pushing this direction, just like how I cut that circle out. A lot of times, if you can do that, even if you need to make a cut across, if you, instead of going in at it this way, if you can come into it and be pushing against the Fordite into the waste block or into the bank of what you have for strength, a lot of times you're better off. If you're trying to make cuts across like we do with wood and other things, a lot of times you're going to peel those layers. So it's just a good way to do it. Now, this particular ring, I'm actually going to try to take off, just like I said, I'm going to take off a bunch of this bulk right now while I can push it into the block. If I cut the ring off and then go to turn it, I'm going to be turning the exact way I said not to for the bulk of this. So I want to take off a lot of this material right here. So I'm going to, oh, wrong tool. I'm going to get a little closer here. And by pushing into that, I'm using the strength of the plate and everything. So here I'm going to make my cut and I'm going to come into it this way. So I'm cutting that little lip, kind of like how the boring head just cut on the inside. Oh, I didn't cut my, that's all right, we'll figure it out. I'm going to cut my line off, but that's okay. I'll ballpark it. So I still got a lot of material there. Still got a lot of material, that's good. All right, let's take a look. So we can start to see these really cool patterns emerging, the swirls and things. It's really gonna look good. All right. I'm going slow, but I could speed it up. I'm going to do one more. Now, just because of the shape of my tool and the angle I'm going, I'm going to put my diamond in here and kind of clean up this inside. And then I'm going to actually try to use it to separate the ring. So I'm going to cut into my waste block. So one thing I don't want to do has ruined this beautiful ring by cutting it too small. See how solid we are. Oh, perfect. So, I was able to just kind of pop that loose. You can see, let me do the overhead here. Let's see, where are we? There we are. Hopefully you can see, start to see the patterns coming out. I've got this rough side where that was glued. I'm going to turn that off and true that up real quick. And we will shape this pup. All right, so actually, let me think here. We might try to do all this right on the ring mandrel. Oh yeah, we got it. Okay. So what I was looking just to see if I have enough clearance to do the cleanup on this, and I think I do. If not, it'll be a spectacular crash for y'all. And remember, don't over tighten these. I'm just kind of snugging it, making sure it won't turn. Never crank it down, you'll crack it. I think which has only been a handful, every ceramic ring I've seen broken was broken on the mandrel. All right, let's see how we can do this. Boy, that thing's really wobbling. So I'm not cutting across, I'm pushing into the mandrel, I'm pushing into the Fordite. I don't want to cut across it and pull those layers off. I got a little ways to go here. So I'm getting up close to it and pushing in. And you can see my shavings are nice. They're coming off clean. I'm not stressing out the material. And if you're wondering why I'm careful with Fordite, go price it and you'll understand. Fordite is not cheap, and it's actually getting harder to get. And I was thinking about it the other day, I think it's getting harder to get because they're probably getting a lot better at manufacturing, and they probably have a lot less waste in the process. Actually, look at this. I've got, let's see if we can see it right here. There's some cracks. So before I go any further, I'm going to CA this because there's like a fold in the material, which looks really cool. However, I'm going to try to squeeze it down in there. It looks cool, but if I get any kind of movement on that, or it starts coming, when I start to turn it at me and I start using a different tool, if I get a flap, it'll just pull the whole layer off. And it's not like a wood chip where it'll shave, it'll actually pull the flat layer off because Fordite is layers of paint, not grain that moves. So I got to really make sure I don't have that happen. Okay. Let's get it close here again. I think we're getting closer there. Got some glue in there. Now, one thing I do with this ring mandrel, and you might be able to see it, is I'm holding my tool to where my carbide tip is above. Let me stop this to show you. My carbide tip is above the cuts. So if I push in here, I'm actually hitting this part of my carbide tool. Let's see here. This part, the lower, and I won't catch the carbide. So I'm making sure that my carbide can't, even if I push this all the way in here, my carbide tip can't catch those lips. And that actually helps me kind of get close without risking damage. Okay, we are really close here. Let's do a little bit more. Whoop, what did I do? Okay, we're good. So I'm going to do one more cut. Go over here. Okay, so this piece is ready to shape. This is my riskiest point here now because I'm actually going to have to take my carbide tool and cut it. I don't want to come in this way. I'm going to come in from the side and kind of push against it gently. And I want to make sure that I stay even with this because if I get a little low and I catch a lip, it'll just lift off. Speed this up. Kind of add around. Beautiful Fordite shavings. All right. So I'm gonna keep going a little more. And I'm just taking a little bit off at a time. Now my ring's a little shaped like my mandrel, so I'm going to kind of clean up the shape. Okay. Now I've still got quite a bit of material on there. However, these rings tend to get a little bigger. Oh, look at that. Let me show you the cool patterns. Yeah, we got some cool little dips and things. So what I want to do is give a little taper to the edge, but I'm actually not going to do it with my tools. Let's do it with the sandpaper. A lot of people will turn most of their Fordite with sandpaper, whether it be a ring or a pen, and you can do a lot with sandpaper. I'll actually rough them down pretty good on my my disc sander. I'll put the tube in and I'll kind of round it down pretty close, and then I'll use negative rake. The negative rake works really well, so don't hesitate to use it. Got a pretty tough piece here. What you can see is, see the color, and then when I put it in there, all that brown that came out, that's the sand, or that's the paint. This paint gets really disgusting. It'll be all over my shirt before we're done here. But you see all that brown or gray? That's the paint sanding off. So, I mean, you're sanding paint here. Keep that in mind. Right now I'm just pushing on the corners to kind of bring the corners down. Keep dipping it in the water. You want to keep it wet because you don't want to breathe the dust, and you also don't want to overheat it. Overheating paint is just like overheating polyester resin. It's not good. So if you have any questions on these, any of the process, throw them out there before we wrap up here. I know we're getting kind of close, but we want to polish this for y'all. And if you have any questions on Fordite or any other material, let me know. You can hit me up at Turner's Warehouse, Turner's TV on YouTube, or Chad Schimmel on YouTube. I got two channels. One is the Turner's channel and one is my Goof Around channel. So you never know what you'll see there. And if you want to try any of this, we have all this stuff at my store, Turner's Warehouse. Got to throw in a plug, I hope. All right. So you're going to see real quickly, I mean, look at my water turned from fairly clear I mean, it wasn't brand new, but it was fairly clear to mud. When I sand pens, it's just a disgusting mess, but then it's always worth it at the end. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna go right to some 600. That was 400. And this 600 is really gonna smooth it out. And you can see how quickly the sandpaper will get loaded with the material. And you see it splashing all over me, the black. All right. And I'm gonna Zona this for y'all. All right, couple questions. Could using a boring head to do the OD? Absolutely, you could. You would just have to set it up. I just didn't want to take the time, but that would actually be really consistent if you did that. So that's not a terrible idea at all, but you absolutely could. Negative rake cutter, yes. Whenever I do Fordite, I only turn with negative rake. I've turned a lot of Fordite over the years, and I've never had, I shouldn't say never because I'm sure I have, I just don't remember it. I've hardly had any breakage with negative rake, but I do a lot of prep, sanding it down, getting it close to size, and then using the negative rake, so that really helps. But the negative rake, that's kind of what it's made for, is that weird material. It's not hard, you know, negative rake's a lot of time hard resin or brittle hardwood. Fordite isn't hard, but it is certainly fragile and odd. So definitely use negative rake. Protect your lathe, don't get it wet like this. All right. So I'm going to use Zona, and I'll show you all at the end here rather than step by step. So Zona paper goes from 30 micron to 1 micron. And these papers are going to just get disgusting with this paint. It's going to be kind of cool. But we're going to have a really cool piece at the end. So I'm just holding it with one finger and kind of moving it with the other. Keep it wet. You notice I didn't do any kind of CA finish on this. I have not ever found the need. I've got pens that have been around for 10 plus years out of Fordite that are still looking good. When it's smooth and sanded, it's really nice. If it's got blemishes, or if you don't sand it right, it'll get it'll get rough because of the direction of paint and rotation. You got to hand sand sometimes. If you do that, you can have rough spots, and that'll cause the layers to come apart. If you sand it smooth, it's very tough. And I've not found the need for any kind of finish. Oh, that one's backwards. Use it the right direction. But you can probably see, if you're seeing the sideways view here, that this paint is starting to look shinier through the water. And that's because it's getting shinier. And I really want to pinch the sides here and make sure I got my edges all looking good. I do like to go back and kind of touch up the edges by hand carefully off the lathe, but if the lathe can do the work for me here, I'm going to let it. All right. This is the 1 micron. Basically, so soft you can't even tell what side is the right side, but there is a way to tell. It's smoother. The last thing you want to do is take this down to 1 micron and then take a paper towel or something, and while it's running, go around it, because you're literally going to put scratches in it that you just polished. All right. So I'm going to take a paper towel, but I'm going to turn it off. And I'm just going to pat it. And then let's give you guys a view. Get it to zoom in here. And I'll take it off, actually. So that white ceramic looks pretty darn cool with the Fordite. And I got some tubers in here. A lot of times when you do this, you'll have the dust and the crud will kind of build up on the inside, and you can just kind of go around, and if it's stuck, you can knock it loose. Usually it just takes cleaning to like make it shiny. All right, what do you guys think? That is a pretty cool ring. It's got some great waves. Almost looks like an omega symbol right there. Does anyone see that? Pretty great. So if I wasn't happy with the polish, I would just do it again. If I wasn't happy still, I could put a plastics polish on it. The Fordite does work well with plastics polish. We use a lot of ring bling. It's a thing we have at our store. And it kind of just is the final step to clean and polish, and it looks really good. So I'd probably do that if I wasn't sure. We got 2 rings done in 2 hours, not bad. And actually, if you practice this, you can probably do a ring in about a half an hour once you get it under your belt. So it's really cool. All right, thank you. I think we'll call her a day.